Hello, friends. We are here preparing to have a gathering where we discuss integral Christianity and what it means, how you can come to understand this and apply it in your own life if you want to. And as we continue this conversation, you'll see that there are several different aspects to this Christianity, or any integral spirituality in general. And what we want to do is work with coming up with a more comprehensive, more inclusive, a fully embracing Christianity that covers not only all of the traditional factors covered in Christianity, but many of the things that have been learned about human growth and development over the past 2,000 years. These are things that I have no doubt were they known at the time that Christianity was being formed, they would have been included in Christianity itself. So what we want to do is look at some of these new factors and see how they can dramatically change Christianity, its scope, its outreach, and in particular, its actual relevance in a modern and postmodern world. It's becoming, of course, increasingly out of respectability. It's not taken seriously, increasingly, by thought leaders and by individuals that are having an impact on our culture. And religion just seems to be slipping behind. And we think we know why. And we think that we can take steps and actions that will actually help improve this, help change this, help make religion a vital and moving force in the modern and postmodern world. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, just by way of introduction on some of the topics that we'll be discussing. Now, one of the things that we're looking at is an actual transformation of consciousness. We're not looking just at belief or belief systems, where I profess to believe that Jesus is the one and only Son of God, that he was born of a biological virgin, and all of the other myths that are reported in the Bible. We're trying to look at the actual realities that occur with individuals as they awaken to their own Christ consciousness, as they awaken to their own deepest, truest, highest realities, and start to live from that awakened stance. So as we look at this, we're looking at the various states of consciousness that humans have available to them, and the ways that those states are transformed from narrower, partial, denser, limited states of consciousness into broader, higher, wider, all-inclusive, even timeless and eternal states of consciousness, constituting our real salvation, our real liberation, our real awakening. If we look at the world traditions, what we often find is that they list the major states of consciousness as being essentially 5 in number. These include, for example, if we look at Vedanta Hinduism and Vajrayana Buddhism and Neoplatonic approaches in the West, we find that these 5 states of consciousness are said to include things like the waking state, the dream state, the causal state, the witnessing state, and the ultimate non-dual unity consciousness state. And the aim of meditation or contemplation or centering prayer is to move individual wakefulness from the waking state through all 5 major states of consciousness, resulting in that state of pure unity consciousness, of pure oneness with the entire manifest realm. And so this is what we want to focus on as we look at what's called the path of waking up to our true and real and fundamental condition. Now, as we look at these 5 states, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, witnessing, and unity consciousness, what we find, of course, is that waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, most of us are familiar with these. Now, most of us are not conscious during those states. We're conscious during the waking state, and then we more or less pass out as we move into the dream state and the deep dreamless state. But these are states that are maintained to possess profound secret awareness and secret knowledge that we can discover as we move our awareness into these states. And so ultimately we start out at waking, then we move wakefulness into the dream state, wakefulness into the causal state, wakefulness into the witnessing state, and then finally wakefulness at the ultimate unity state, the state of pure oneness, the state of ultimate enlightenment and liberation. Now, the first 3 states, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, we're all familiar with those. Now, most of us, though, are just wakeful during the waking state. When we enter the dream state, we tend to pass out or not be aware that we're dreaming. And certainly in the deep dreamless state, we don't tend to remember that either. But various meditation practices can help move our awareness into the dream state where we start to lucid dream. We dream and we're aware we're dreaming. And then into the deep dreamless state where we also have a tacit consciousness, a tacit awareness in that state. So those are all important, but they can also take several months or even years of practice in order to master. But it's the highest 2 states, the witnessing and the unity consciousness, that are the most interesting. Because number 1, they're said to already be present. They're ever-present states. And 2, they're the states responsible for our awakening, for our actual enlightenment, our actual metamorphosis, our moksha, our great liberation. So what we're going to do now is focus on these major highest states. One's referred to as Turiya in Sanskrit, and Turiya simply means the 4th, and that's in relation to the first 3 states, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, or gross, subtle, causal. Those are the first 3 states. The 4th state is witnessing. And that means it's simply an ever-present awareness of these other states. As waking arises, the witness is aware of that. As dream arises, the witness is aware of that. As deep dreamless sleep arises, the witness is aware of that. So the witness is this very high state of ever-present awareness, registering all of our other changes of state. Now we can get in touch with this witnessing state by simply doing the following exercise, which we'll walk through and you can get a sense of. You can start by simply becoming aware of yourself. Just get a sense of yourself, pay attention to it, notice it. And then as you are aware of yourself, start to describe it to yourself silently. But you might start to think things like, okay, my name is such and such, I'm this tall, I weigh this much, I have this kind of education, I'm in this relationship, I work at this job, I like these kinds of movies, I like this kind of book, I enjoy these kinds of music, I'm married, I'm not married, I have kids, I don't have kids, and so on. So you just get a sense of this self of yours and just really try to feel it, really try to notice it, really try to get it in awareness and see it, feel it. As you do that, notice that there are actually two selves involved. One self is the self you're describing, the self that weighs this much, works at this job, is this old, and so on. All the things that you could see and describe as an object. But then there was also the self that was doing the describing, the self that was witnessing this object self, this small self. That pure self, capital S self, is the pure seer. It's nothing that's seen. And as a matter of fact, the pure seer can't be seen. It's doing the seeing. So it can no more see itself than a tongue could taste itself or an eye could see itself. It's the pure seer, aware of all the seen objects and the small self that you're aware of. So what if we want to contact this true self, this real self, our self, capital S self, not our small, egoic, seen self that we just described, but the self that was doing the describing, the self that was doing the seeing, the true self, the real self. How do we contact that? Well, first of all, we can notice that we can just rest in the state of witnessing, rest in the state of the observing self, and just watch objects as they arise, stay a bit, and pass. But notice that as you're trying to contact this witness or this true seer, if you see anything, that's just another object. That's just another seen thing. That's not the real seer. And this is where people tend to get confused. They try to find the real seer, and they just end up seeing other objects. And those are just small objects. Those are seen things, not the real seer. So as you rest in this real seer, and you sort of push back into it, and you try to get a sense of what's seeing, not what's seen, then you have an attitude of, for example, I see the mountain, but I'm not the mountain. I have sensations, but I am not those sensations. I have feelings, but I'm not those feelings. I have thoughts, but I'm not those thoughts. Rather, I'm just a pure seer, a pure awareness. I'm not the contents of awareness. I'm the pure awareness itself, the pure seer. And this seer doesn't see particular objects. All you notice when you rest in this seer or rest in this witness is a sense of freedom, a sense of release, a sense of letting go, a sense of not being bound to any objects or things that you're aware of. So I see the mountain. I am not that mountain. I'm free of that mountain. I have sensations. I'm not those sensations. I'm free of those sensations. I have thoughts. I'm not those thoughts. I'm free of those thoughts. So the pure seer is just a vast field of freedom, a vast openness, a vast spaciousness. And that spaciousness is this true self, is our true seer. And again, all we notice when we get in touch with this seer or this true self is a vast sense of liberation, a vast sense of freedom. And that sense, that witness, is also always aware of eternity. Now, we have to understand eternity before we can understand what this means. Eternity doesn't mean living forever in time. Eternity isn't everlasting time. It's a moment without time. It's the pure present, or the timeless now moment. So paraphrasing Wittgenstein, he said, if we take eternity to mean not everlasting temporal duration, but a moment without time, then eternal life belongs to those who live in the present. That's exactly what the witness does. It's just aware of the timeless now moment. So you can look at your thought processes right now, and you're thinking of the past, and you're thinking of the present, and you're thinking of the future, and they all seem sort of real. They all seem scattered out in a line that are really there. But if you look at the past, think of any past moment you want. All you're actually aware of is a thought. And that thought is occurring now. When that past event actually happened, it also was occurring now. Think of a future occasion. Again, all you're aware of is a present thought. And that thought exists only in the now moment. And if that future ever comes to pass, it will also be a now moment. So the only thing that you're ever actually aware of is a pure, ongoing, timeless, present, or now moment. That's all the witness is ever aware of. So there's a Zen koan that says, show me your original face. And original face means your real self. Show me the self you had before your parents were born. A self you had before your parents were born? Now, Zen means this literally. It's not symbolic. It's not a metaphor. And the point is, of course, in your pure, timeless now moment, you exist before the stream of time unfolds. And so, of course, you exist prior to anything in the stream of time. So, of course, your real self, living in the timeless now, exists prior to your parents appearing in time. It appears prior even to the universe, because it doesn't enter the stream of time at all. It's timeless. And so this pure awareness, this pure seer, this pure witness is living in the timeless now. Christ said, before Abraham was, I am. And that's exactly right. This I amness, this pure self, exists before Abraham. Before Abraham was, I am. And that's pointing to this true self, this real self. And this real self, again, is not identified with any objects that can be seen. It is what the mystics call nete nete. It's not this, it's not that. It has sensations, it's not those sensations. Has thoughts, it's not those thoughts. Has feelings, it's not those feelings. It's a pure, vast, open, empty spaciousness. Now, this I amness is exactly the I amness that, as I said, Christ was talking about when he said, before Abraham existed, I am. And this I amness is the pure I amness before we identify with anything. So it's just the simple feeling of I amness right now. And you're aware of this. You're aware of your simple feeling of I amness. Not I am Ken, or I am John, or I am Mary, or I am Angie. Not I am a doctor, I am a lawyer. Just pure I amness. If you look at St. Dionysius, when he's describing this I amness, it's a staggering list. He says of this I amness, which is one with pure self, he says, it is not thoughts, nor mind, nor feelings, nor sensations. It is not great, nor small, nor equal, nor unequal. It is not life, nor power, nor light, nor being. It is not oneness, nor ultimate reality, nor being. It is not self. It is not thoughts. It is not anything that can be uttered. It is not anything that can be known. That's nete nete, a radical freedom from all of that. That's what this pure seer is. Patanjali said, ignorance, Patanjali was the founder of yoga. Patanjali said ignorance, meaning non-enlightenment, is the identification of the seer with the instruments of seeing. And that's what we do. We confuse awareness with contents of awareness. And so we take our I amness, which is infinite freedom, identified with absolutely nothing, but completely free of everything, this pure awareness that we have right now. And we start identifying it with these itty-bitty finite objects. We identify it with this body, we identify it with these thoughts, we identify it with these possessions, we identify it with these relationships, and all of a sudden we're caught, identified with a world of finite, mortal objects. They come, they stay a bit, they torture us, and they die. That's the typical life, living as the separate self-sense, living as the self-contraction, living as the ego. And so we are this colossal case of mistaken identity. We have mistaken our true selves, our pure seer, for things that can be seen. And once that identity happens, then we're caught in all the machinations and all of the terrifying torture and pain and suffering that isolated individual mortal objects are subject to. As Buddha said, the first mark of that kind of existence is dukkha, suffering. It's the first mark of the world that Christianity defines as being subject to original sin. And original sin just means the separate self that we take on. When we're identified with that separate self, then we see everything is separate and isolated and fragmented and broken. And we experience our lives that way as well. So what we want to do is to reconnect with this one single pure seer and rest in that pure awareness. Not identifying with objects, not condemning objects, not rejecting objects, not holding on to objects, just radically letting go of all of them and resting as our pure seer, pure self. So that's part one of finding this true self. And that's the fourth major state of consciousness that the traditions give out of 5. So now we can move to the next higher stage. This is what was called Turiyatita, beyond the fourth. And it's beyond the fourth because the witness actually dissolves into everything witnessed. And so now we're going to try and see if we can't recognize that state. Again, it's actually already happening. We just have to recognize it. We have to spot it. So for this, start by getting in the witness, getting in I amness. So I have sensations, I'm not sensations. I have thoughts, I'm not these thoughts. I have feelings, I'm not these feelings. I'm pure witnessing, pure awareness. Not any contents of awareness, not anything that can be seen. Now pick an object 10 or 20 or 30 feet. It can be a table, a chair, a car, small building, anything like that, a computer even. And focus on that object. Now, you're in the state of witness. You're focusing on that object. So you have a sense of the looker, and you have a sense of that which is being looked at, the object. Now, what we want to do here is slowly let the object start to dominate awareness. And just let it start to become everything in awareness. Of course, it, and there will be several objects around it, and you can include those too, but particularly focus on this one object. Then feel your looker is standing back and watching all of this. Now, let that looker start to dissolve. Just let it go. And let it be replaced by just this object that you're being aware of. Let that object come to dominate the field of awareness. Let it push out the looker. There's just the object arising by itself, self-arising, self-existing, self-aware. Just that object. Your looker is smaller and smaller and smaller until it actually disappears into that object. You actually feel a oneness with that object. And what used to feel like your looker now feels like this object. That's what you are, this object. Now, Douglas Harding had a great little exercise for this, and it was called On Having No Head. And so we can do a little of that and move this along. So as you're looking at this object, begin by noticing that you really don't have a head. That is to say, you can't see it. It just seems to be an empty space. And you can sort of see two fleshy blobs on each side of your face. That's your nose. But then the rest of your head, you just really can't see. So it's just an emptiness. Now if you look at that object and really focus on it, you'll start to see that that object actually exists precisely in the empty space where your head used to be. That object is actually touching that space. It's right between your shoulders, right where your head used to be. You're one with this object. It's actually on this side of your face, right where your head used to be. You're that close to it. You're touching it. And so this oneness means that there's not two worlds. There's not a world outside your face and a world inside your face. All of these objects out here are actually appearing on this side of your face where you thought your head used to be. So it's that close. Everything is arising within your being. Everything is arising on this side as part of you. There's no separation between the looker and the looked. The looker is gone. There's just what's being looked at, and all of that is appearing where your head used to be. It's that close. And there's no separation between looker and looked. There's just these objects arising within you. So you're not in this room. This room is in you. And so all of a sudden, the separation between inside and outside collapses. Everything out there appears in here, in you. And that oneness is the state of unity consciousness. Now, Trungpa was once asked, what does enlightenment feel like? And he said, the sky turns into a big blue pancake. And of course, the sky starts out there. But then he says, the sky turns into a big blue pancake and falls on your head. That was his definition of what enlightenment felt like. It's a little bit funny, but it's absolutely correct. The sky, which seemed to be out there, turns into a pancake and is right where your head was. It's literally touching you where you thought your head was. It's so close, you can taste the sky. It's sitting right on top of your shoulders. It's arising within you. And you are one with everything that's arising. And it's arising within your being. The entire universe is arising within your being. That's unity consciousness. That's pure oneness. And, of course, when you're in that state, there's nothing that you particularly want or need, because there's nothing outside of you. Now, your individual organism might want something, might get hungry, and so on, but your awareness doesn't feel a lack. It feels a superabundance, a oneness with everything. It's one with everything that's arising. And so that oneness is your true being, your true condition. And also when you're one with everything, there's nothing to be afraid of. The Upanishads say, where there is other, there is fear. But when you're one with everything, there's no other. So there's nothing you can crash into that's going to hurt you. Not when you're in this state of oneness. So this state of oneness is beyond desire and beyond fear, and is a radiant oneness with everything that's arising. And it's arising within your awareness. It's arising within your being. And that realization, you can again probably start to see, that's the way awareness was always working. You were always one with everything that was arising. Even though you split it in two, split it inside versus outside, subject versus object, and then all the other opposites, pain versus pleasure, good versus evil, up versus down, in versus out, and so on. But for this absolute side of you, this oneness is your fundamental condition. So we have these two highest states. Both of them are always with us, but we continue to overlook them. And we continue to get caught in a case of mistaken identity. We continue to get caught in a little self. We identify with objects. We identify with this body, these thoughts, these desires, these things. They're all temporal. They all come, stay a bit, torture us, and leave. And that's the life in time. But the life in timelessness is a life of radiant oneness, of absolute fullness, of radical freedom, and complete overabundance. And that's the state that is universally maintained to be the summum bonum, the ultimate good of a human being. And that's what the core of the great meditative traditions have been aiming for thousands of years. And that's the core, of course, of spirituality in general. Now, many people have a fairly easy time getting into the witness, but they have a little harder time getting into headless oneness. And this is where Christianity can come in so powerfully. And I noticed that reading Adi Shanta's account of Christianity and my own experience with Christianity, that this bringing love into the picture was very, very important. Now, love is mentioned, of course, in many of the world's traditions, but it's really central in Christianity. It's really what marks Christianity as a path. Christ said, "A new commandment I bring you, to love each other as I have loved you." And of course, the famous, "Love thy enemies as thyself." So love, if we look at it, is really the force of creating oneness, of creating these wholes. So when we really love somebody desperately, then we feel a special unity with them. We feel a special oneness with them. And even, as I was saying earlier, even if we say something like, "I love ice cream," what that really means is I want to eat the ice cream. I want to be one with it. I want to be that close. I love it that much. So God, in some traditions, is, particularly Christianity, the God with qualities, not radical emptiness, but God as it takes on qualities. One of the qualities that it's assigned, particularly in Christianity, is love. And that's to emphasize that God is the power of making oneness. God is the power of making wholeness. This is often called eros, the drive towards higher unities. And so having God as love helps us move from the separate self to the unified self, the self of oneness. And some of the simple ways to do that is, again, because it's fairly easy for people to get into the state of witness, go ahead and get in the witness. But then you'll notice that the witness tends to be standoffish and sometimes cold. It just watches, doesn't get involved. doesn't have any real emotions. It's just a pure reflection of everything that's arising. So you start in this position of witness and start renaming the witness. So first, simply call it the feeling witness. Now that already introduces a little bit of emotion, a little bit of touch. Because when you realize you're witnessing something, you actually are touching it. Awareness is touching this thing, and that's how you know it. So the witness is really a feeling witness. And as you look into feeling, as feeling intensifies, it actually turns into becoming one with what it's feeling, because it has to touch it, it has to embrace it, it has to enfold it. So it's actually tending towards a loving witness. So move into not just witnessing, but love witnessing. Realize everything that you're aware of, everything you're witnessing, is something that you're loving. And that all of a sudden makes the witness very warm and very loving. It's reaching out and touching and eventually becoming one with everything that it's aware of. And so by inserting love into the witness, between the witness and unity, you can actually get that catalyst that helps move that separate self. And the witness is just the highest separate self. It still stands back and, as absolute subjectivity, watches. It's not one. But as it turns loving, it begins to embrace, in a oneness, those things it's aware of. So, this new commandment that we're given is really a commandment to move from the witness to ultimate unity consciousness, to pure Christ consciousness, to pure Godhead. And that is a powerful, powerful path of helping us get from the fourth to the fifth state. And that loving also just brings that general warmth to this unity consciousness. Now, Buddhism, for example, emphasizes compassion. Compassion is great. It's very important. But notice that love and compassion are very different. Compassion is something that you extend only to circumstances you feel sorry for. So if somebody loses a job, you say, oh, I have so much compassion, I'm sorry. If somebody inherits $1 million, you don't go, oh, I'm so sorry. You have all my compassion. I wish it hadn't happened. But you can love somebody getting $1 million. So love is the all-purpose, universal solvent for dissolving separation, whatever it is, and moving it into oneness. And so that's what we want to do. Compassion, again, that's great. And we want to practice compassion. But love is more embracing. Love reaches out to everything. And so we want our awareness to be not just awareness, not just witnessing, but loving. And that is going to get us from our separateness to our oneness, and with an emotional, warm, feeling component to it. So that, in a sense, brings even kind of a more human side to it. It brings a side that is more caring and reaching out to individuals. And it also helps you love yourself and realize that your own highest self unconditionally loves you. And that gives you a feeling of safety and satisfaction and fullness that you might never, ever have had before. But in realizing that your own highest self, which is one with spirit, is pure love, then that means not only love for you, but love for the entire manifest universe. That's what Christianity brings to the picture. And you really don't find that anyplace else. So I'm sure that a lot of what we'll be seeing in these various presentations are people helping us see how love can make a big, big difference in our otherwise fully mystical path. It's not taking away from mystical oneness. It's enhancing it. It's making it better. It's making it more likely. And so that's one of the factors that we include in an integral Christianity. Now, we include a lot of others, and some of those are going to be very surprising. All of them are very applicable. You can apply these in your life in ways that will make a big difference. We're already seeing this happen. We have research showing that these things really work and that they really are going on. So we want to encourage people to stop by, see what we're doing, see the new developments that are happening in spirituality, and ways that all spiritual systems can still hold on to their fundamental, traditional beliefs, but they can supplement them with newer discoveries. Some of them were only discovered 100 years ago, whereas most of the religions were set in their present form 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. So this is an exciting time. It's an exciting time to see how religion can actually be brought up to date and therefore contribute to the very best and most loving and brightest possibilities that human beings have, as opposed to being, which it has been in other ways, the single greatest source of murder and torture and homicide in humankind's history. Now, how can it be both of those? We think we have an answer. And by showing the different aspects and the different ways that spirituality grows, we can help grow it towards those directions where it's radically loving, inclusive, and a sheer boon to humanity, not to mention our great liberation and our freedom. Whereas if we don't do that, and it remains fundamentalist and ethnocentric and us versus them, it's going to continue driving wars, terrorism, fundamentalism, and continue to make religion the single most destructive force that humans have ever encountered. And it's astonishing that one thing can do both of those. But it's one thing in very different dimensions. And we've got a lot of information on what those dimensions are now, so we can start to put those into play. And individuals can start to put them into their lives. And it's going to make a big, big difference. So come out and enjoy this gathering and see what you think about what this means.